You're listening to Tara Lynn's A Geek Saga podcast. This episode features audio from a discussion panel that was recorded at Ice and FireCon 2022. So this is the Nailed It or Failed It panel. I've actually done this panel a couple times at DragonCon, and of course it has been on the Ice and FireCon schedule since 2020. But the point of this panel is to discuss character arcs mainly. We will probably touch on some more generic things, but character arcs mainly, and whether or not Game of Thrones, the show, nailed it or failed it when they wrote these stories. So we have a list of characters that were voted on by patrons, and then we also had done a little bit of talking amongst ourselves via email. And I guess, do we want to just jump right in with the main list? Because we've got about 50 minutes to cover a lot of things. So the first character, let's just get this one out of the way, Daenerys. And to be honest, I think, we all are coming into this with our own opinions on the matter, but audience members, if you have a thought, a question, whatever, please just raise your hand and I'll point at you. This is definitely a discussion amongst all of us, not just us up here. So, Daenerys, I guess, let's start with Jen and kind of work our way down and our thoughts on how Game of Thrones did with this character. Iconic character, really.
I can't give it a total fail because they got some of the broad strokes right, but they kind of hand waved. So, in the sense of, did they show the fine and crafted character arc that we are expect to see in the books? No, that's a fail. They just kind of shortcut it way too much.
We're probably going to say this a lot as we have these conversations, but the last couple seasons, it's really hard to, I feel tie a nice ribbon around any of the characters, especially somebody like Daenerys. And so I feel near the latter half, I would put a fail with a strong start, I would say. And then kind of petering off in the end. We'll see how it plays out in the books, but
we expect that.
Yeah.
I think they nailed it, but I kind of agree. You have to think, and probably also, a lot of the characters we discussed, but probably more Dany than the others. Season 1, if we were just talking about season 1, I think we'd say nailed it, right? Season 2, probably 3, 4, 5, maybe start to get shaky around 5, and at 8, we're no way. But so, what percent do they have to be nailing it to overall get a nailed it, and how bad do they have to fail it to defunct all the rest of it?
We should have decided this before the panel. We need a quotient.
Yeah.
One of those thermometers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I had so many ideas for this that just didn't come to fruition, so it's
We're just researching for future ones.
Yeah. I wonder though, how different our perspective, if we flash forward, I don't know how many years it takes for George to finish, and she does burn down King's Landing or whatever, how different we will think about it then, or when we're more removed from the expectations we have, or it might seem a lot worse if George goes a different direction, but we might be I guess I see what they were doing there. If it pans out closer, she's probably one of the more divisive ones and more the tougher to call. But I do want to make the point. I think for the first few seasons, for almost all the characters, even Dany, I think we would say they were nailing it.
Yeah.
You just made me think about what state of mind she might be in the books versus what we saw in the show if she were to do that in King's Landing. And it reminds me of when she's in the pit at the end of Dance, and there's a lot of violence going on in there and that she's in support of, and people are dying, and it's just it ain't no thing because there's so much chaos and fervor, and she's also in danger. If her approach to King's Landing is depicted in any way similar to that, I think that might be part of the flavor that we're hoping to get from a book version of this, where it's not just a sort of commercialized setup and she executes something that we expect her to, but more she's in it and we actually kind of feel this violence and stuff is justified because we're on her side. That's kind of the essence of what we're talking about right now, because it's difficult for a show. We're excited right now about House of the Dragon depicting what we know that led up to the Dance of the Dragons and the Dance of the Dragons. And it's exciting to think about like all of the angles and the actual like conversations, I mean literal camera angles, that they're going to need to decide on, and the conversations that they're going to need to write and decide on to depict it. So it's like an opposite thing. Like we have like a non-really fleshed out book. We have like basically a story version of what happens, and we're waiting for the show to flesh that out. Whereas the stuff that has been fleshed out in the show is actually like being defleshified by how deep George went into it.
Yeah.
So like as far as like nail it or fail it on Daenerys outside of that stuff, I think that Emilia Clarke was like a really good casting choice, and she's grown on me like the more I've gotten older and have like realized like more about the world, and like so I'm glad that I wasn't in charge of picking it when I was 20 when this all started. And also I think that part of the reason it fell apart in the end for her, outside of the writing, is I think her costumes were fucking terrible. So that's especially
People might disagree with you.
Her wigs, though.
the wigs were bad, and like the candy cane like striped northern fur just like really threw me out of the whole thing. It really needs to feel natural to me, and like Dany in like a rucksack
Can
was way
someone
cooler.
is it Michelle Clapton? Can we get her on the phone?
Yeah, like I feel like it's hard to put it on one person. Like I don't want to put it on her. Like I feel like she had a lot of pressure to do certain things and like keep up in the ante, but it just, those little things like really threw me out of like believing what they were saying when you're wearing like perfectly clean and coiffed and like ironed up little things. Like Jesus, guys. Fight on dragons.
They want to like present her as
You're right.
the queen.
You're right.
But I also agree with you that
Yeah.
it's like it's hard to stay clean and trim all the
You're
time.
fighting
And
a
that
dragon.
kind of That was another little thing too that bothered me. It's like a minor little thing. I can't quite remember what episode it was, but it was when Dany was teaching Jon how to ride a dragon. Remember that? She had this real smug attitude toward him.
Yeah.
It kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and I didn't feel like that was Dany. You know?
Yeah. I think that.
And that was before season 8 for sure, right? Am I remembering wrong? Maybe it was season 8.
No, it was season 8.
Was it
yeah.
season 8?
Yeah.
Okay,
Season
fine.
8,
Yeah,
oh,
of course.
I would.
I think that the wig comment's funny because we could just do an entire panel on the
Right.
the wigs in that show. It wasn't as bad as Rhaegar's wig, but yeah, wasn't there a panel about Rhaegar's wig a few years ago? So for me, it's like I totally agree. They did such a good job with Dany's character in the early seasons, but I'm on the end where I think they mucked it up so bad at the end that it just ruined what they did do well in the beginning. Like even I actually had just finished rewatching the first 5 seasons of the show, and it had been a long time since I'd seen those earlier seasons, and I found myself just about her like the entire time because of how bad the show ended, like for her character.
They owe you money. They owe you like a stimulus check for that. That's not fair. 'Cause, like, remember how good it was when we didn't see through like their choices by seeing them do it badly at the end.
Yeah.
That was so
But I
nice.
think Daenerys is probably the worst of them, I would say. And I think, like, to Sean's point, or to your point, I can't remember who said it.
Is that
You said it. Okay.
you're on podcast and you don't remember my name?
That guy over there, sometimes I podcast with him.
Saying this, whatever. Anyway, the idea that like however George R. R. Martin writes it will like that might change our opinion on how we feel about it. Like when we rewatch later, coming back to it. But I would think that she, like more so than pretty much any other character, had such like a heavy pendulum swing as a watcher.
Big time.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, well, just to start with, I fundamentally view the Game of Thrones character as honestly like different characters than the ones in Song of Ice and Fire. I feel like all of them are so different and so distorted. But with Daenerys, I feel like, for me personally, and I'm not even like a huge Daenerys fan of the books, but I feel like even from the get-go, they so fundamentally misunderstood who she is. And even from the get-go, I found her, like before I read the books, I skipped her book chapters because I thought, when I read them, because based on the show, I was so irritated by her. Even early on, she's constantly saying, I'm going to take the throne because it's my right, almost in like a Stannis way, where in the books, and like her fundamental core in the book is wanting a sense of home. On the show, I feel like her fundamental core and motivation is wanting to have power and be gained into the throne for her family. So I feel like actually from the get-go, even in season 1, that's the side of her they choose to show, maybe because they were trying to angle towards what she would become. But for me, I just wanted to share that because I definitely, even though she is more likable in the beginning, I found myself really feeling unable to stand her even like from the beginning.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. What we're gonna do one more Daenerys thing, and then we're gonna move on to the next one. Yes.
Well, I'm kind of agreeing with what you're saying. I think even in season 2, you can see where in the Karth story, they had to do exactly that. And then after that big discussion they had with George out in the mountains where he told him all the spoilers, right?
Supposedly.
They told
Allegedly.
after that, they told her to be more deadpan, more lifeless. And actually, she was criticized as an actress for that at the time. And when you think back at it, she was doing what she was told, right? So she was actually doing it right, but at least for what they wanted, right? And obviously, in the end, it still fell flat. So they didn't tell her the right things, I don't think. I don't think they were directing that the way it needed to be. That was really what was going to happen.
Okay. So real quick before I move on to the next character, we're going to take a vote. Who thinks they nailed it with Daenerys? Literally no one. Failed it. Yeah. You can like meh if you're kind of in between, I guess.
I'm not voting for nailed it, but I'm not voting for failed it either.
Okay.
Abstain.
So
Yeah.
there is one thing that's second on the list, but I'm gonna move that down just a little bit because something I think that Sean said made me want to move on to Jaime Lannister. Now, my point being because you mentioned how good, or someone down there mentioned how we were talking about the earlier seasons and how good the character development was in the earlier seasons, but I disagree. I think kind of like Jaime was maybe good in the first season, but as soon as he was like the captive of Catelyn and everybody, when he murdered his cousin, just straight up murdered his cousin, that they like completely lost me. And there was an interview with either Benioff or Weiss, I can't remember which, where they said like he's just a killer, he has no heart. Like they completely misunderstood Jaime as a character. It was very clear. And so from that point, I was like, they could do good things with him, probably, right? And they did here and there. We can talk about the end of his character arc, in a second. But from that moment, I was like, no, this is not my Jaime.
That moment bothered me extra. I should clarify, by the way, I started off watching the show and then ended up reading the books later. So as I was watching it, I didn't have certain expectations, right? And so certain things that some of you may have seen and been like, that's not what happened in the books. Whereas I didn't have a problem because I don't know what happened in the books. But sometimes I would still have a problem. Whatever happened in the books, that scene to me didn't make sense because he didn't need to kill him. Mm-hmm. It was just like a distraction for the guard. Well, he could have just said like, hey, help. Like he didn't have to do anything to that guy. He just had to get the guard to come over. But to brutally murder him to get the guard to come over, it just didn't make sense plot-wise. Never mind Jaime's character. So I overall feel like that is what's the word I'm looking for? An exception. You know what I mean? I don't think they were typically screwing Jaime up. I think that scene was super bad, but most of the scenes were pretty good. I personally don't think it's enough to fail it, but I'm also not so sure they nailed it either. So
so other panelists' thoughts on Jaime?
Jaime, well, I guess I take your point about the beginning too, and I think they did some really good things in the middle. And then the end is no. So overall, I think they failed Jaime a lot. I mean, had some good moments, but and those good moments, to be fair, I think would be attributable to Nikolai. So because he was well cast, he was such a good actor, really made us love the character. But the ending, so wrong. Yeah.
So what about the ending did you, because like personally I was like, I get the whole idea of him and Cersei going out of the world together, but the way it was is kind of the same with Daenerys. The way it all happened was just nonsensical.
Exactly. And then that might be the way, like maybe they are going to die together, and that's just certainly set up for that in books, but I don't, first of all, death by sealing is just probably not the way it's going to go, and I don't think it's going to go with him. I don't think he's going to be on any kind of terms or conciliatory terms with Cersei at that point. I think he's...
Also, wasn't it the death by sealing, weren't the rocks like very small? Like when Tyrion went to find them, they're just kind of buried under like pebbles.
He's like, oh, look, there are their faces. Right.
They're right there, like under nothing.
Under some dust. So the whole situation was probably
I feel like it kind of undoes his whole, like the whole point of his arc. Just kind of got undone.
Moving away from Cersei and it becoming his own person, whatever his relationship with Brienne, which I never expected it to be like a happy ending for them, but still, the whole point of him was that he went away from Cersei, and then just to go back to her at the end.
So immediately too.
So,
And
like,
you
but
said,
nothing.
yeah.
There's no impetus to. I don't know. It's just jarring.
That's one thing I try to do sometimes in TV is to understand that they need to get to a certain point, and sometimes they don't have the budget or the time to go through it all.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one scene, one line of dialogue, they could do it. And sometimes I understand it, I can forget that. But this is too big. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's too much put into this already. They've got too many people depending on it. That it's. I mean, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, but it should have just been
Exactly
full 10
right.
episodes on those
Two
7,
more
8
seasons.
seasons,
Yeah.
and one more season after, and then. Maybe we could have swallowed a lot of the stuff that went poorly a little bit better.
Yeah.
But
Jamie wouldn't have written right from being post Brienne to like, all right,
Yeah.
now that I've had that experience, now I'm going to go die for Cersei. Like,
Yeah.
right immediately after. It's a long horse ride. Who needs to see what else happens?
Is it though? We're not really sure how big Westeros is anymore.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
He got there in a day.
Yeah. He took the bus down. Yeah, transit.
He borrowed Baelish's TARDIS. Yes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I feel like they, like, in trying to get to that ending, they, like, failed Jamie so hard that they managed to also cause Brienne's whole story
Sure.
to get failed, too.
Yeah.
Like, just as an, hey, we gotta get Jamie here, so, like, screw her whole development as well. Let's
Yeah.
leave her crying, like, outside in a yard.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
that didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that, like, with the way how they did it, I think it's a lot more believable in the books and I do believe that Jamie is going to go back to Cersei. But we're in the middle of the series and the ending of Feast for Crow, so it makes sense that he has divergent there, and he has time, so as he can eventually go back and they can go die or whatever they're going to do. But, like, yeah, they rushed it so bad that they just put all of that in the last season. I think that there's one line where if you took Jamie out of context with this line, I think it sounds a lot like Book Jamie, where he says, Cersei is hateful and so am I. That is a very, like, season 1 Jamie and Book Jamie line for me.
When you think about Nikolai's face when he's playing Jamie in season 1 and he's like talking to Ned at King's Landing and just sort of like brooding around, it's like, oh, this is going to go somewhere. And I think that's part of the reason why we really like it. Like, oh, this is going to go somewhere. It's a really good actor. Clearly he like emotionally understands and is grounding himself within the person that he's playing. And then he's forced to do those lines that are in season 8 and just to close it up like that. It's just, it kind of like cheapens the whole thing. Like you said, like it cheapens the Brienne situation as well. Like even when she's writing his name in the book and stuff, it's like, but why? Like he wasn't even a full person by the end of it.
Yeah, but the Brienne and Jamie scene in what episode 2?
97 Kingdoms?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my favorite scene of all of season 8. And so it's like, I kind of give a little
Right.
shout out to like their moment when she gets knighted, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like that almost fixes some of the.
at least for Brienne.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, okay, so vote Jamie nailed it. Yeah, no. Yeah.
I thought he was so good that he nailed it.
Okay.
Remember him and Brienne? Like
Yeah.
going down the river?
I
Yeah.
think if you just that first
The bath?
episode
Yeah.
is enough, like they really nailed it. Like
Yeah.
maybe you forget later
Right.
on, but if you just go watch some of those
Well, if we take
first
season
season,
8 out of the question, then it's,
Yeah.
I would say
Nailed it.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I'm on the failed end.
I get it. You just
because
rewatched it too. You're fresh.
yeah. Oh, and also again because like they jump around so much with his character, right? Like he's so dumb. Like he's so good in season 1, then he's so dumb about killing his cousin in season 2, and then they start actually putting him through a character arc, and then they just take it away.
Sprinting at Joffrey at the wedding. That's that gif of him. No, my son.
Okay, so because we've been talking about Brienne, let's touch on her real quick because she's a very different one where, if we ignore the crying when Jamie leaves, right? Let's pretend that never happened, okay? Strike it from the record. I didn't like the way they started with her character because, in the books, she's innocent. She's never killed a person. When she does first kill people at the, oh my gosh, Crackclaw Point, right? Crackclaw Point. I was like, there's a castle tower thing there that's named too. I don't remember right now. But when she does kill people, she feels so awful about it, and she remembers her her swordmaster telling her, if this ever actually happens, it's not going to be as easy as, fighting with wooden swords in the yard. So in the show, she just they introduce her, and very soon after that, she's, just murdering people along the road. So I did not like that, but it was that one bit after they kind of got that out of the way, I thought they did a really, really good job with her for the rest of the series. So we'll go down this way. Zach, what do you think?
Well, I really love what you just brought up, because that's a fun thing to notice. I liked it that she killed people. I was like, oh shit, we like her, and she's ruthless. She's this dangerous. It's I know a lot of the point is that she can do that, but I thought it was a cool sense of danger for the show, at least, to show that she was willing to just stab people through the back or the heart with a sword. Damn. But yeah, it is not really doing her character justice. Really, it's just more entertaining. I agree. I really like Brienne. I think that obviously her story is a lot more rustic, I guess, in A Song of Ice and Fire, a lot more plodding around. When you think about Podrick and his little palfrey and shit, it's not as shiny. There's not as many beautiful trails that they're riding on. There's less command. I feel like she has less command around Podrick in certain situations in the book because it's just so much potential danger. And you think about what happens with her and Rorge and Biter, and the fact that she almost dies in a way more metaphysical way, in a sense. They didn't really capture that, I thought, in the show that well. And I understand why that they didn't do it, because it's that was part of what made Feast for Crows good, but they're making a whole TV series. But as far as the casting and the way that they made her feel dangerous and shit, I feel like they really nailed it.
Yeah, I think they nailed it, basically. Yeah. I don't have a lot to elaborate on. Sorry.
Keep doing it.
Yeah.
I would probably do nailed it too. And there's so many scenes that I would say that show Brienne made me love book Brienne more too, in some strange way. I just think that she brought the character to life so well. And then I also think about that scene with Jaime and Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, and then that scene that she has with Sansa outside of Winterfell, right? In season 7. Those are some major high points for me in watching the TV series, and so that kind of adds to my love for her as a character on screen. So I would say nailed it.
Overall, I would say nailed it. I do have a big problem that it basically took her entire feast arc out. I mean, the fact that they didn't include Nimble Dick Crab, what kind of... but, also, I mean, they didn't include Stoneheart, so they couldn't do all the other stuff around her properly. So that's very disappointing, but they somehow managed to, I think, for the most part, stay true to the character if we're striking a certain scene from the record. So.
Yeah, let's just pretend she never cried over Jaime.
I think that... I'm trying to get a thought out. I think sometimes they fail the plot but nail the character. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And I think Brienne is a good example.
Yeah. Right. That's a good point.
Yes.
My issue with Brienne's characterization is very similar to the one that happened in Arya's, which is that I think, well, as I said earlier, I really feel like it's created very different characters from the book characters, and those two, they erase their empathy. Like what you brought up about how one of her earliest scenes is about just let's see what a badass she is. And I think they really just wanted Brienne to be just a badass, and to show with both Brienne and Arya that girls who play with swords are cool, and girls who don't play with swords and aren't cool, and kind of reinforcing a lot of misogyny truly in their depictions of women characters on the show. And in order for a woman to be powerful and exude power, how they did with Cersei, she needs to then erase traces of masculinity. She has to dress like Tywin. And so I think with Brienne, I had the opposite experience of you, where I didn't reading the books is what made me love her. Reading about how vulnerable she is, and with her and Arya in particular, their empathy, especially towards other women, whereas Arya on the show literally says most women are stupid, and Brienne tries to distance herself from other women.
They did do that, huh? That's crazy.
Yes.
So you talked about her feast arc. You mentioned Nimble Dick, but also Hyle Hunt. Those are two things that kind of expose her weaknesses, her inability to trust, and things like that we didn't see at all. We only saw her interacting with Jaime and with Sandor, but that was just a...
And Podrick. There was some great, having just rewatched the first 5 seasons, there's some great Brienne and Pod stuff.
Okay with But Kyle Hunt, he had an arc where he was distrustful, not somebody that you trust, but he actually ended up in the end liking her and wanting to support her. But she never saw that in the book, at least not to now anyway. And they cut him out as well as Bill Dick, and it really, I think, hurt us seeing her actually grow as a character.
All right. Yes.
Sounds like we're 50-50. It sounds like there's a lot of support, and then there's also really good points as to why they failed it. On brand right now.
No, not if we get rid of that one scene. Brienne nailed it. I mean, I think they did. Yeah, that's a pretty big consensus, I think. Failed it. Is there anybody? Oh, you got a couple of them. Wow. Okay. All right. Dissension in the ranks. Okay, I want to do one more character that probably, at least in my experience, having had this discussion twice in the past, that was probably nailed it. And also, I feel like we already talked about Daenerys, so we might as well talk about Jon. But briefly, because he's boring. But they did. I do think they did a good job with his boringness. So, what about you guys? Thoughts on Jon?
So I think they did pretty well with Jon, the character, but Jon, the story arc, they really, really dropped the ball on making the whole RLJ thing matter. Like they set it up, they showed it, they're like, oh, this is a thing. And then it was like, yeah, okay, we'll just move on from that. Like there's absolutely no reason why that mattered. Nothing is ever made overt as far as why they even bothered, other than the fact that was the detail that got them the show in the first place. I mean, so they had to include it, but they didn't. It's almost like they didn't know what to do with it. So, character good, story arc. Yeah.
I would also agree with with the Night King and the White Walkers and all that ending so abruptly for Jon too, as somebody who's so much of his story was like trying to bring everybody to this understanding of what was happening, and then it all just kind of ended so quickly and he had to like shift. I don't know, I think that also didn't help with his kind of character arc. I think that like we've been saying, I mean it's really hard to have this discussion for so many of these characters with like season 7 and 8 because we just like, I feel like everything was just cut so short. But I would say in terms of vibes that they like hit the nail on the head with like his emo brooding like boringness.
And his ending, because I do think that he's going to end up beyond the wall with Val.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be in a Val cosplay today. Oh, sorry. Work out. But so I think they were right about so much, but there's just some weird, it's the thing I say a lot. They just kind of hand wave a lot of, important things. Yeah, important things.
Well, I mean, I think that's kind of the general like consensus on the show, right? Like they were ready to be done with it. They had other things that they,
Which makes no sense.
Yeah.
At least they finished it. What if season 8 still hadn't come out?
Come back to Ice and FireCon 2033 when we might finally actually be able to compare the show to the end of the books.
Yeah, I agree. I think I don't know what else they could have really done because I don't know how the ending really goes. So that's really my main complaint. It's just like, for example, Daenerys like really got steamy-eyed pretty quickly. It really seemed like there was a lot of context there for it to be so above everything else.
Look, they could have even just made it like that. His dragon blood is what made him and Daenerys like there's some magical attraction or something. They didn't even do that. It was just,
at the very, I guess at least they had like the dragons like him, like on the cliffside. That was pretty cool, but not enough.
I mean, I think it's really like in terms of them ending like up together. It's two pretty people who haven't gotten any in a while, right? Like they don't. Neither one of them has many options, and then it's like, whoa, you're hot too. Cool, let's bang. Yes.
I think they just missed his arc in A Dance with Dragons. His political mess ups, the way he worked with both Alice Karstark and Val, the things that he did right. All the things.
What political mess ups?
with his that cancer arc. And that's the thing I don't like. At the end, they probably got that right. But Dance, they just missed it. It's gone.
Yeah.
I think they nailed the character of Jon. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely the things they could have, should have done. We don't know how the ending should have gone. It's definitely a big miss with making R+L = J matter. But the role of John, the performance of Kit Harington, I don't know, the whatever elements you want to put into a character. I don't know how they could have nailed it any better, other than knowing how it ends properly. But.
The script, it comes back down to the script.
Yeah.
Also, Rob's supposed to be a little bit more handsome to him, and that was right in the show too. So he did a good job. Yeah.
Kit was very good at brooding. John does a lot of that. Yes.
So I'm actually with you. I do think that their absence of doing most of his dance art did do a lot in failing his adaptation. I think that they ought to have incriminated at least a few of those elements. Maybe, and if you all know me on Twitter, they should have added in leathers. And mostly because they needed that connection between the Free Folk and the Night's Watch, and they barely did that. They did it with Tormund is John's friend, whereas Leathers is directly instigated into the Night's Watch, and he sort of pushes them to be more about fighting others than the Free Folk and each other. So I do think that not having most dance, especially Leathers, really, did a lot to negate John's arc and character, in my opinion.
All right. So quick vote here. Nailed it? I think they did. Failed it? Same dissenters. I have my eye on you. Okay. This next one is a pet of, I think, several of us on the panel. Instead of a single character, we're going to talk about the failed entire part of Westeros called Dorne. And I literally led with they failed it because, let's be real, we all know they did. And this is we can talk about separate characters too, because obviously it's kind of the characters that they wrote, the story that they wrote for Dorne, and the way they used the characters to propagate it, that led to all of Dorne being a fail. So, Jen, we'll go this way this time.
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, Dorne was an obvious fail. The scenes in Dorne were just, it was bad from start to finish.
Laughably, yeah.
Jaime going to Dorne and just that whole thing. Why were we even watching that?
He was wearing a robe. He totally wasn't Jaime Lannister.
Total disbelief about that. I will say that they got Oberyn very right.
Yeah.
So, cheers for Pedro Pascal, because he was probably one of the probably one of the best parts of the whole show. And they got his death scene and everything. They nailed that, but every other part, anything touching on Dorne was just.
Well, and the crazy thing is, they had Ilaria right at first.
Right, she was good.
And then it wasn't even, it was like an about face, I don't know, a train crashing into a brick wall. I'm not sure what was going on there.
It's not even close.
Hannah, any?
I mean, I don't really love Dorne in the books at all, in the first
How
place.
dare.
I feel like there's even more of a disservice done in the show. All I can think about is the set pieces too. It just looks like a weird soundstage. You know what I mean? I feel like we had so many beautiful set pieces, and then we get to Dorne and it looks like they were on a stage where someone put some plants around. And so I just feel like that kind of Zach, you were talking about being taken out of it by Daenerys' costuming. I feel like just the scenery and the staging in Dorne is just silly. And so on top of for somebody like me who already finds most of the plot to be fairly boring, then you put just bad characterization, bad set pieces, as you've been talking about, the hand waving kind of one and done way of handling the storyline. I just feel like that just is funny.
You're just
what are we doing here? So
It's almost like they could have had Oberyn and not included anything else from Dorne at all.
It would have made Dorne have this cooler, mysterious vibe.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
And it wouldn't have affected the ending at all because Dorne, they dropped it after that season, and then when they came back at the end, there was this new Prince of Dorne that nobody knows where he came from.
Right.
Who was he?
Oh my God, I forgot about that. Just like D&D kind of forget about things. I forgot about the Prince of Dorne.
I don't
Who
know
is
who
he?
you are, because they were all dead. All the Martells were dead. I
Yeah.
don't know where they found that kid.
It does seem like in the big picture, at some point they realize we either aren't or can't get this Dorn stuff in.
Yeah.
And so we're just not going to just
gonna
kill
walk
Duran
away
and
from
forget
it.
about
Maybe
it.
they won't
Maybe they
notice.
had to address it because they started, and maybe they only started because they felt like they needed to touch on it, didn't plan on going deep. I don't know, but I knew right off the bat. Again, I hadn't even read the books at this point, but when they first introduced the Sand Snakes, if you remember that scene, they've got that ship captain
Yeah.
buried up to his
Yeah,
neck,
yep,
and
I
the
remember.
sisters are there, and they're like, I forget which one it was now, but she's like telling this story about, my dad, and I'm like, do her sisters not know this story? Like, why is she telling this story? And I'm like, well, maybe it's for the sake of this ship captain. Maybe they want him to go back and recount. But then they kill him. I'm like, well, what's the point of any of that?
Exposition.
They ride off into the desert and they just leave that tent behind. Like, why were they there?
Yeah.
Where did that tent up? What did every angle of that, I was just scratching my head. It was like the first time in the show for me without book expectations. I was like, I didn't like that part.
The
That
tent-
was no good. I don't want to know what they're doing
The
here.
tent is just the Westeros version of the rest stop. It's the rest stop on your way into Dorne. Welcome to
And the wind
Dorne.
has never knocked
They've got
it
brochures
down.
and maps
Like,
and
Yeah, same. Literally, that was the same shit I said all those years ago. I'm like, what is going on here? She's delivering this sassy dialogue to who exactly?
Yeah.
And she's got the big reveal to her sisters, of this guy that's here. She whips the barrel off his head. Yeah, that was pretty nuts. That was weird. I imagine if we would have gotten Quentin though. I always want to call him poor Quentin just because. Imagine if we got PQ in GOT, that would have spiced up the Myronese story a little bit. You got someone trying to steal the dragons while they're also about to get invaded. That would have been so cool and fun and made Dorne a little bit better. Just show Red Viper and then just show him there doing that plot.
I'll say this much, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but
you're
real
good.
quick, if they had cut out some of those nonsense brothel scenes from the earlier seasons, maybe they would have had time for Ariane, and they still would have had all sorts of nudity and sex.
Exactly.
But it would
way
actually
hotter.
be plot driven,
Right.
sort of.
Right. I could have a whole list of people they could cast for that role. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right.
Interrupt me.
Back on my minor character bullshit real quick. So with Lauria's Sand, the way that they failed her is also speaking to how they failed the message of the books. In that what vengeance does is constantly put you in a hole. And Alaria Sand in the books sees that, and she has the best speech this side of the Broken Man about her. And the fact that they removed that and made Alaria Sand go full vengeance is just horrible to me, and I hate it.
Yeah.
So cartoonish the way
They
that she
gutted the
just
character.
yeah she's it's like you said they have her when she's interacting with Pedro's character he's just they're human. It's there's depth to their relationship, and you could tell it's just there's a different consciousness inside of that woman's body as she's playing Ilaria with that season versus when she comes back and is speaking later. It's she's 50% less lucid.
Well, she cut her hair off, so
Maybe that's it.
all of her empathy was in her hair. So
Apparently, the curls.
Like a Charlie Simpson.
yeah, not strength but empathy. Yeah, so Dorne, it was rough. I agree with you. I'm so glad you put it on the list because there's all these characters, and then you were just no, Dorne in general.
yeah, all of Dorne. I do it's not something I really had thought about before, but I like what Hannah was saying too about the sets. You're right.
Oh, yeah.
I really hadn't thought about that, but now that I'm literally thinking about these scenes that I just recently watched and saying, oh my God, it really does look like they're just they're on a stage like this and
Right.
somebody threw some plants down.
Right.
Really.
When Jamie's sneaking around it.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
What's the classic villain hiding behind the plant?
What's really sad about that is actually a real place. That's a really, I forget what it's called.
Yeah, it's in Spain.
It's got a nice
Spain.
name. It
It's
was
beautiful.
They had to become
Segovia.
Game of Thrones to be able to shoot there. Basically, it's a beloved place, and they let them hang Dornish the Martell banners in there and to clear all the tourists out. The problem that I really found with that, and we've talked about it on Goop before, is just the way they shot it. It was just really lazy. If you guys look at the blocking of that fight scene for one.
Oh, the choreography in that fight scene is
Tyene
terrible.
is literally at one point just wiggling her dagger around like this. It's
It's
the best shot that they
The
have.
image of action in the background
Yeah.
without actually being choreographed action.
Yeah.
Right. I think maybe when they're on those actual sets, like inside of Titanic Studios, where there's only like a V shape of a wall, you have to shoot it really artistically, because if the camera angle's too wide, there's like people standing there eating popcorn. But like I think they were like really loose and free inside of that one particular sequence in season 5, episode 4 that we're making fun of. Because the whole place was literally that beautiful of a place. And when you're in like a really fancy place, sometimes it does look like they put the plants there, but you gotta like get the camera in really tight and then like turn it to the side a little bit and play with the focus. Like, you guys remember how Instagram pics used to be artistic? Like, you basically have to do that, otherwise it looks like crap. Anyway. Dorn.
Yeah. Well, what about Doran? Because like, to me, it almost felt like he didn't exist. Like he did, but he didn't, and he didn't really need to. Apparently,
I need a War Scout. That's what I needed.
Huge disappointment, because I think we had so much anticipation for Alexander Siddig.
Yeah.
Like, just so good, and then it was like, oh, and he's gone. That was it. He's gone.
Yeah.
He never really had a chance to put a mark on the story at all.
Yeah, I think Laura really would have killed him if he was like that.
She's like, there's nothing even wrong with your feet. I see nothing wrong with you.
Right.
Where's all the...
Why aren't you walking around?
Yeah, you can totally walk around.
I think he's one of the most, to me at least, one of the most intriguing characters in the book. But to be fair, we don't really know that much about him. And it's hard to convey that intrigue onto a TV show. Not impossible, but it would take more time and focus. But instead, they just wanted to have hot young girls that you can't even distinguish. She's the one with the whip, and she's the one with the, like I didn't even know their names. Like I was like taking notes on this show. I really cared and was really paying attention, and they were just empty shells of characters to me. And it's anyway, I'm just.
Well, one of them was the most beautiful girl in Westeros.
I remember that scene very clearly, actually.
Yes, that terrible, terrible scene with Bronn.
It was terrible, but it was fun to watch.
Oh my god!
I think the only good thing.
I had forgotten that scene.
Yeah. I think the only good thing about Dorn was Olenna showing up, honestly. That was at least funny.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that did happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that happened.
That did happen, yeah. That was toward the end, right?
No, really, my favorite was the Prince of Dorn in the end of season 8.
Oh, God,
whoever he is.
Yeah.
I want to know more about his backstory. Audience, any thoughts on Dorn?
No one's going to talk about bad pussy? Okay.
Oh, I mean, we can talk about that.
I think I just did. All right.
That's all you need to
We
say.
just acknowledge it. Yeah.
Acknowledge it.
Yeah, it happened.
I mean, there was also the Asha, Yara, whatever, and Ilaria stuff was an interesting development.
Oh yeah.
I mean, honestly, whatever, Asha, you can do better, Asha, than show Ilaria anyway. There was a hand. I saw him. Yes.
I had a hand. I just want to say, because Sam Rixine is not here, so I do have to shout for her that they did not do Dark Star, and that's terrible.
It's the worst thing in the world, honestly.
Terrible decision.
The fact they didn't have Geralt in that show makes me hate it. The whole show has failed.
He's so over the top. It's almost surprising because of how over the top he is that they didn't include him.
Can you imagine? He like unsheathes his sword, and like as he pulls it out, a beam of light falls all the way to the tip.
He goes, who are you? And he's like, I am of the night.
That's what we would need. Maybe he was the new Prince of Dorne. Right?
Oh my God, that's
better.
all they would have had to do. Literally, all they would have had to do is give that guy a wig or dye his hair so that he had dark star hair. They would never have even had to say his name, and every single book reader would be like, "Oh shit, it's Dark Star."
Driving us all crazy.
Just a little nod.
Yeah, just one little nod for us book readers at the end at the end of it all.
It wouldn't have been enough. We'd still be talking about how they failed it.
Well, Dorn anyway, for sure. Okay, so we have a few more minutes left. First of all, I mean, really, is anybody actually going to nail it with Dorn? Right? No, we're all failing Dorn. Right? Like big high fives. Yeah, double votes. So in the last 5 minutes or so, we're going to do a little bit more rapid fire. So no long discussions, but some of the characters that we have left on the list. Theon. I think they did a good job with Theon. I still am not. I meant about Alfie Allen because I don't think he was attractive enough. But because Theon in the book is supposed to be super attractive, but his acting was amazing, and I think they wrote him really well. So Any quick thoughts on Theon?
No,
Agreements,
I agree. I
disagreements?
nailed it. Yeah.
I also was not attracted to him.
Yeah, I'm not attracted to Alan.
Yeah, I expected something a little bit more, I think. But he did the acting.
I agree.
was
The acting, he was
on
top,
point.
So good.
at least top 5, top 3 actors in the show. And overall, if I have to vote, nailed it or failed it, I think they nailed it.
Oh yeah. Nailed it with Theon or anybody.
But they could have done more for sure.
Oh yeah. There's I think that's kind of the consensus on everything is they could have done more. We could have been so much more.
There's nothing major.
What about Stannis?
I say nailed it.
Hard nail.
Controversial, but nailed it.
Yeah,
His
hard
character's controversial,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
for sure, but I think his representation in the show, I think they nailed it.
I think the only thing I'm not sure about is the burning of Shireen. Do we think that's going to happen in the books? I know everybody says that, and part of me is like the Stannis stan in me is like, but no,
He
don't do
was
that.
he was perfectly ready to burn Edric Storm, and I think that's the setup for Shireen.
Yeah.
They're showing us how Stannis is like, okay, if that's what it takes.
I think it's more for me like that. In the books he's very dismissive of Shireen, right? Like he doesn't. But in the show they built their relationship a lot more, and
They
it
did that
actually
for a
seemed like
reason.
he cared about her more than Sleece did. So it was
She
very.
had her jar babies, so.
Ooh, I forgot about the jar
You gotta
babies.
keep in mind-
That was a trivia question one year. Was what would the name of of her jar babies?
You got to keep in mind that this is a world where there is real fantasy elements. There really is magic or god or lore or whatever. And and for us in our world, the idea that you would like burn a child, like we're aghast at it. But what if we really knew? What if the clouds parted and God came out of the sky and told you, if you burn this child, you will save everyone in Ukraine or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
well, I might think about burning the child. You know, like
How dare.
I wouldn't want to do it. I'm not sure if we should do it, but it's not like someone is doing it because they're just evil and heartless. There's this real power that is going to make a real difference. I understand it.
I think that'll be the difference in the books is that that's the conversation or the debate George wants us to have, whereas in the show it's not that deep. So when it comes to whatever happens in the books, it's going to be a lot more nuanced and there's a lot more conflict and
Yeah. Well.
But take
Yeah.
away from this combo that Sean would burn a kid.
Yeah.
Should that be stricken from the record?
If God's part of the sky,
only if God.
Okay. So.
I might, because I might. Well, I'm
Oh no! Now.
not my God.
New panel. The discussion of. Okay, so Stannis nailed it. Failed it for Stannis? Oh, I got quite a few. Same dissenters. Again, I've got my eye on both of you. Okay, Littlefinger nailed it or failed it. Yeah.
This is another perfect example of how I think they were pretty close to nailing it, at least in the beginning, and just to throw it away in the end.
Why
Like,
did they change his? Why did he become Batman?
Play with her ass.
I think for me, it's just it will never cease to bug me how he was just going around telling everybody what he was doing. Like,
even in the beginning, I do think he was like they were using him. What's the word? Exposition.
Sex-
He
Yeah.
was a way
Sex
they got to
position.
know stuff, and I kind of accept that as just a way that TV is written. I was okay with it, but yeah, I failed it. If I had to vote, he's failed it. Yeah.
all right, Littlefinger nailed it. Yeah, failed it. I think that Aidan Gillen could have done like so well, but the voice, the voice
Yeah.
thing, that was weird.
And I feel like that was something that he was told to do.
Yeah.
He didn't do it at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then, he is an actor. I've seen him in many other things, and he's perfectly capable of putting on different voices.
Right.
So I feel like that the directors were like, hey, how about if you do this cool voice?
No, that's interesting. Yeah, code switching depending on who he was talking to. That does make sense. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I guess I didn't see him talk to enough people,
Yeah.
to get a lot of
Well,
variety.
he's always just talking to the camera.
okay. So while we're on the subject of plotters and secretive stuff, Varys nailed it or failed it.
No mermaid tail, so failed it.
Yeah.
I saw his
saw
feet.
his feet.
I saw his
We saw
feet.
his
Yeah,
feet.
yeah, for free. Yeah.
I think with the material they were using, because they obviously cut out a big, huge part of his story, I think they did pretty well with Varys.
Yeah.
Yeah, Colin Thill was
I
awesome.
like
Yeah.
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah. Varys nailed it, guys. I'm more toward nailed it than I am toward failed it on this one. Failed it. Yeah, I get some failed it.
I think it ruined it for him.
Oh yeah, the ending did not
I
nail
remember
it.
seeing
I think at this point it's like, let's just forget the endings for all of these
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And then maybe. Okay, we'll do a few more quick votes. This one's funny. You're on Greyjoy.
Oh my god.
This one's funny. This was a literal joke. A literal joke.
You're on Kettle Black.
Yeah, there you go. Or whoever that person was putting on the name of Euron Greyjoy.
Yeah, that guy did look like Bam Margera.
I feel like we all liked Euron for like the first 3 minutes. Right?
Yeah.
Like
there
there
wasn't
wasn't
good
like,
expectations.
I
At the
feel like
very-
at the
yeah.
very beginning we were all like, interesting. But then it went south.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I just say, I didn't finish the show. I stopped after season 5. I have not seen Euron, but the fact that you said it and everybody laughed speaks volumes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
He's like emo pirate.
Like off-brand Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, like he wanted to be Jack Sparrow for Halloween really bad, but he ordered his costume from Ally Express.
Yeah.
And it came with like stupid everything, including a character.
Jack Sparrow with Captain Hook and up the cheese to 11.
Also,
I'm keeping Euron up here. He's, in my own head, but like the fact that the whole room laughed.
Yeah.
One shred of menace.
No, he's not scary.
he
No.
was a Dawson's Creek character.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Literally.
There's a little
He was
bit of
pacing.
humor. Like I give him credit for getting a couple of good laughs out of me, but
True.
he was not the character.
I think they weren't the laughs that you wanted to. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it got laughs, but it was more just like. Okay, so nailed it with Euron. Yeah, no, failed it. Yeah. All right, one more very quick one. I don't know. Who do you guys want to do last?
Arya?
Arya?
Is Arya too long?
I feel like Arya would take. Well, we could just do like real quick vote. Arya, nailed it or failed it? Nailed it. I'm mostly with yes on her. Failed. Sansa, nailed it.
Story or character?
Yeah. Well, if you didn't watch after season 5, it's kind of.
I stopped watching.
Yeah, if you didn't watch after season 5, you. Yeah. Failed it with Sansa. I'm more toward nailed it with her, but I'm a little bit in the middle.
Okay, what about
Sandor?
that?
Sandor, nailed it. Failed it. Nailed it. I think nailed it. Failed it.
Tywin is one of my
Tywin.
Yeah, nailed it.
In terms of like nailed it.
You'll note that I left one very important character off this list because I did not want to talk about him anymore. Tyrion, nailed it. Anybody nailed it with Tyrion?
I need the nose, but otherwise-
Failed it. I'm
Closer to the field.
I'm on the failed it version or failed it end of that just because he is not the morally gray character that we have in the books. Yeah. All right. Well, that is it for this panel. Thank you for listening to the Geek Saga podcast. If you like what you heard, please check out other Geek Saga entertainment endeavors, including the Sagas and Sass webcast and podcast and Ice and Fire Con.